Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is my number 12 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Denver Broncos. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment in the comment section below. Help out with those algorithms. Grow this channel and subscribe if you haven't already. Denver, last year, was easily the most disappointing team, I think, in the entire NFL. People had them ranked in the top 10 when they made that blockbuster trade for Russell Wilson. I had them sort of like middle of the pack in the league. I think I had them ranked like 15th or 16th, just because I was watching what Russell Wilson had been doing leading up to that trade and just saw some regression. Nowhere near the amount of regression that he actually showed last year. But it'll be interesting to see this year how they counteract that, because they did then turn around and make a second blockbuster trade 2 years in a row. Two blockbuster trades. This one was for the head coach, Sean Payton. Very, very, very important move for them. He is one of the best coaches of this era, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He's used to working with quarterbacks who are a little bit smaller. Drew Brees, he made the Hall of Fame career of Drew Brees with that offensive scheme they ran in New Orleans. And they're looking to bring that now to Russell Wilson. But, I don't know. Because of the trade, they weren't really able to do a whole lot in the draft. They were able to acquire a first-round pick by trading away Bradley Chubb, which then turned into Sean Payton, which I actually don't mind. I thought there was a lot of teams out there that should have been considering that had a much better draft pick. The Sean Payton, of course, had to agree to go there. I pegged the Chargers to be that team, and turned out to be the Broncos, and I think that is going to be the difference in the seeding of this division. They are the number 2 team in this division for me, and it's really just a one-game swing. I do think that they're matching up against a team like the Chargers is going to be a problem, and that's really because of what happened. They picked up 2 very key and heartbreaking injuries just at the beginning of camp. There was KJ Hamler, who had a heart condition, who was put on waivers. They say he will be back, but they don't know how much time he's going to be missing. And then there was Tim Patrick, who last year tore his ACL right before the season started. He got paid a big contract, came off a great year. They were looking to put him as a three-headed monster with Russell Wilson. He got hurt and then tore his Achilles just the other day. And he's done, again, 2 straight years in a row for Tim Patrick off the roster. So that is something that does bring them down a bit. And I think that when they go up against certain teams in their division now, especially the Chargers, who actually have pretty good depth at the cornerback position, I think it's going to cause some matchup issues for them, which I think otherwise wouldn't have existed. They still did draft Marvin Mims in the 3rd round, who is now going to get thrust into a really key spot. They also went and traded for Adam Trotman, who I believe was a draft pick of Sean Payton, the tight end. So him coming in and being paired with Greg Dulcich, trying to find their Jimmy Graham, I guess, in this offense. Jerry Jeudy, most certainly, I think, would be the one taking the mantle of that bigger slot receiver that was once filled by Michael Thomas there. But then they have to look at who's going to be their Alvin Kamara. Is it Javonte Williams? Who's going to take that mantle in the backfield? They got Tyler Beatty, who was drafted last year by the Baltimore Ravens, who they were able to pick up. They also got Samaje Perine, who's more of a first and second down back, almost like a pure backup to Javonte Williams. So how are they going to incorporate the running backs into the passing game? Because they're going to definitely have to do that now with such a lack of depth at the wide receiver position due to these injuries. They drastically improved on the offensive line. They brought in Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey, Ben Powers really going to help out with that interior pass blocking. And Mike McGlinchey, just a lot of balance out there at the right tackle position, a good complement to what they have on the left side with the veteran Garrett Bowles. I think they drafted a real sleeper to compete with Lloyd Cushenberry for the center and Alex Forsythe from Oregon. I was actually really liked him. He was like a top 5 center for me in this draft. I think he's somebody who could potentially end up stealing a starting spot on this offensive line. I think the other 4 positions are pretty much decided. There's not a lot of depth there that can really compete anyway. Then you go with the defensive side. They lost Draymond Jones and they replaced him with Zach Allen, which I feel was a bit of a lateral move, to be honest. So I don't expect too much improvement at all on that defensive interior. With the edge group, didn't really make a lot of changes either. They brought in Frank Clark, who I think will take up the mantle as more of like a situational pass rusher, like that third down, pin your ears back and blitz off the edge with Randy Gregory on the other side, who I think is going to be more of the 3-down outside linebacker. They got Baron Browning, who I think can play inside and on the edge. They also drafted Drew Sanders, the linebacker from Arkansas, who it's going to be interesting to see where they work him in, because when you run a 3-4 defense, you got two interior linebackers, which is taken up by Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell, who are both actually quite good in the run game. So I think Drew Sanders, who's really like this bigger blitzing type inside linebacker, will have to try to find his role out there. And I think the secondary is also quite good. But let's start with the grades, and we'll start with the coaching staff because that's really the biggest move that this team made this offseason. So this is my number 6 coaching staff. It would have been probably into the top 5 if, and we'll start with the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, coming over from the Chargers. He's got a bit of a target on his back. I talked about in the Chargers video my general distaste for Brandon Staley's style. The analytics garbage where they're doing ridiculous things, going for it in certain situations, running certain schemes and plays because, 51.2% of the time this results in at least a 3.5-yard gain or whatever that garbage that they were going through there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Lombardi moving away from that and going to Sean Payton and taking on Sean Payton's style of offense and implementing sort of like his own little pieces here and there, how that changes what they were doing last year with Nathaniel Hackett. Now, Sean Payton did come out and say that was the worst coaching job and instantly regretted saying that, but he wasn't necessarily wrong. I think it was a terrible coaching performance. We saw it on the Manning cast where they wasted 45 seconds to then just try and kick a 66-yard field goal or something to try and win the game rather than calling a timeout and then going for it, getting a good play in. So there was just a lot of stuff where it might be unfair to have even judged this offense last year because of how horrific the coaching job was, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So how Sean Payton comes in, has he lost a step? I think that's another thing as well. I wasn't going to judge him based upon thinking that. I think taking a step away from the game, taking a breath, maybe looking at the landscape of the entire league rather than just being hyper-focused on one organization and one roster can have a lot of benefits, especially for a coach as smart as him with all the experience that he has coming from that Bill Parcells coaching tree as well. He's an invaluable asset to any team in the entire league. The one coach that actually didn't suck last year that I think is fairly getting a second chance based on the circumstances is Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator. He's somebody who has been given a lot of opportunities in the past. He has some successes and some failures like any coach does. I actually kind of like what he does a lot of the time. The development of Patrick Surtain, that extra step that Surtain took last year, fantastic. How he utilizes the front seven is really an intriguing act because he's got Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell as the inside linebackers, but he's got the depth behind him and Drew Sanders, who they used a day 2 draft pick on. So they have to have some sort of plan for him, but he seems sort of redundant to what they have in Baron Browning, who it's going to be how he gets used going forward. He got converted to being an edge guy with like off-ball linebacker skills, kind of like a Kyle Van Noy type of a deal. So how he executes that front seven with the bodies that he has, they drafted Nick Benito last year as well. How much he gets used now that they brought in Frank Clark, I think is really up in the air. They added some pieces in the secondary. They're developing pieces in the secondary. They figured out a way to get a white corner which awesome, and we'll get to him. But I think Vance Joseph, he's got a bunch of above average pieces that he has to in turn get good to great performances out of. Justin Simmons has to bounce back. How is he going to put Justin Simmons in positions to succeed throughout this season where he lives up to the contract they gave him? Kareem Jackson, the veteran, returns as well. How much playing time is he going to get? How much are you going to use him in comparison to guys that might be a little bit better, especially situationally, like PJ Locke? You drafted JL Skinner, who is a bigger box safety. It's going to be something where this new staff has to take a roster that is, I guarantee you, is running on almost zero confidence whatsoever. Russell Wilson humiliated himself last year. Sean Payton was traded a first-round pick to rehabilitate this veteran quarterback who was literally humiliated, who did the cringiest things throughout the whole season, who developed a reputation online through leaked sources that he was, above everybody. This was supposed to be their Matthew Stafford trade that the Rams made, where it was the last piece to the puzzle. They were going to win a Super Bowl guaranteed, and they finished bottom 5. Sean Payton has his work cut out for him. Is he capable of rehabbing an ego like that? Is he capable of revitalizing a career that has been on the downward trend for the last couple of years for people that have actually been watching the career of Russell Wilson? Can he be the difference for this team taking that next step forward? You can tell by the ranking. I think that they're going to be in the upper half. It's going to be tight, though. This might be a situation where Sean Payton comes in, it doesn't work with Russell Wilson, and then they're looking at a new quarterback next year. Let's just say, last year, we could chalk it up to a poor coaching performance. With Sean Payton, that's not the case this year. If this team doesn't perform, it's not because of the coaching, it's because of the roster and the talent or the lack thereof. So how this roster responds to Sean Payton, and Sean Payton is not married to any of these players. He didn't sign any of these guys. He didn't draft any of them, except for the guys that got drafted this year. So it'll be very interesting to see how certain guys, like you saw it with last year with the Giants and Brian Daboll, certain guys, didn't matter who they weren't getting on the field. Kenny Golladay. So it's going to be an interesting year, and they got a lot of stiff competition coming forward, and they're going to have to get high-level performances out of this roster, and there's certain positions where it might not be that easy. So here's the big elephant in the room. It's Russell Wilson, who I give a 71 grade as a passer coming into this year. Last year, he looked completely incapable of reading a defense. He looked completely incapable of throwing accurate footballs. He looked completely incapable of making pre-snap reads. He looked completely incapable of coming off of the first read of the receiver during the play. He looked completely incapable of being able to scramble and get out of the pocket and escape and extend plays. He looked as below average at best as a quarterback has looked in a long time. It was a significant step back for Russell Wilson in a way that I don't think we've really seen from a quarterback in particular in a very long time. Ironically, probably the last time we saw such a significant step back was another veteran quarterback in Denver, and that was Peyton Manning in that 2015 season. Now, they won the Super Bowl that year because of how good the defense was. But that was a significant step back. And people were saying that was a significant step back, and Peyton Manning retired after that. It was so significant. Russell Wilson has never been as good as Peyton Manning, despite beating him in a Super Bowl. And I would say that step back Russell Wilson took was more significant than that one. And that was, again, like I said, one of the biggest of all time at that point. Is Russell Wilson capable of humbling himself enough to follow the lead of Sean Payton? If Russell Wilson can humble himself down to the point of like a rookie quarterback in terms of buying into a head coach, in terms of buying into an offensive scheme, in terms of buying into a play style, then I think he can maybe improve this rating by about 10 points. Because Sean Payton's scheme is that good. His receivers, at least the starters, are that good. I think his offensive line is going to be much better than it was last year. But he needs to be able to humble himself in that way. And I'm not sure that Team 3 is capable of doing that. I think that they will win more games than last year. I think that is a guarantee. There's too much added talent for that not to be the case. And the upgrade in the coaching staff, again, too much there for it not to be the case. They are a fringe playoff team. What's going to make the difference in them missing the playoffs and them getting in the playoffs is this quarterback. He needs to be dialed in and committed in ways that I don't think he's had to have been for maybe 3 or 4 years. And ironically, in those 3 and 4 years, we've seen the downward trend. So is he capable of pulling the nose up on this plane? We're going to see. I think he's better than Jarrett Stidham. I'm not opposed, though, to Stidham coming in and just being a straight-up game manager. I think they could have maybe equal amounts of success based on the sample size that we've had from Russell Wilson the last season and a half, which I can't imagine a world where a couple years ago I would have thought that. Something this team could really lean on, though, is the running game. Now, you see the top 2 running backs there, Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine. Williams is coming off of a pretty, I think it was an ACL injury. Was it an ACL or Achilles? It's one of the two. So how he bounces back from that, not everyone's Adrian Peterson. You know, we saw with Saquon Barkley, it took him about a year and a half to really bounce back from his ACL injury. And he's a significantly better talent than Javonte Williams, no offense. They brought in Samaje Perine to sort of be the hammer on those early downs to, I think, work Javonte Williams back into the role of being the bell cow running back. Michael Burton was brought in, a fullback. So when you bring in a fullback, especially Michael Burton, who's actually really good, he's one of the better fullbacks in the league, I think that shows a certain level of commitment to the run game, especially the power run game. To have a guy who's a pure fullback back there. So I would expect to see a lot of I formation, take some of the pressure off of Russell Wilson, work the play action game in there, and lean on this backfield that even in the receiving game, Javonte Williams is the better receiving back. Michael Burton can come in and be like a poor man's Kyle Juszczyk almost in this passing game. I do like Tyler Beatty, who they brought in from Baltimore, to get some opportunities in the receiving game as well. I think early on in this season, we're going to see a lot of three-headed monster at that tailback position with Williams, Perine, and Beatty. I would expect on first and second down it to maybe be a 65-35 split between Williams and Perine. And then on the third down, I probably expect there to be like a 60-40 split between Williams and Beatty. Of course, Williams gained the bulk of that. But I think slowly working him in and not just throwing him to the wolves, I think maybe 12 touches a game is in the future of Javonte Williams for the first, third of the season, just to see what you got in him. And you want to have a guy like Samaje Perine in particular, and Tyler Beatty, frankly, as well, to help wear down these defenses and have a healthy rotation in there and keep the fresh legs. I think that's going to be really imperative to the success of this offense. Now we're going to the receivers and tight ends, and this looked a lot different just a couple days ago. Marvin Mims was probably wide receiver 5, and now he's thrust into being wide receiver 3. by a wide margin. Jerry Jeudy, I think, needs to really take this year to establish himself as wide receiver 1. I think he is going to be used the way that we saw Michael Thomas used in those Peyton years in New Orleans. So that's a great opportunity for him. Michael Thomas, I think, had the most catches in a single season. I think he did break that record. I don't necessarily foresee that for Jeudy, but I do see a lot of quick slants using Judy's elite level route running to their advantage. And then you got Cortland Sutton, who was coming off an injury last year. And hopefully now with that full year gap between that big injury, he's going to be able to maybe get back to the form that he was in. I think based upon how this offense is run, he only really needs to be a wide receiver 2 now anyway, but you prefer for him to get back to that wide receiver 1, obviously, status. Marvin Mims getting a bigger role than he probably expected when he got drafted by Denver, but a tremendous decision in hindsight to use that third-round pick on him, because to lose your wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 within a couple of days of each other is a devastating thing to an offense. Good thing it happened at the beginning of camp and not closer to the beginning of the season. They also acquired Adam Trotman, like I talked about at the beginning. I think we're going to see a lot of him and Greg Dulcich really alternating time in the receiving game. But really, other than that, they don't have the depth. Like, you can see the wide receiver depth, how much it fell off. Keep in mind, it was like maybe Hamler, I think, was got a 68, and Tim Patrick was maybe a 69. So you would have had a lot better depth in that receiving room. The tight end room kind of is what it is. Albert O is like that big, bulky, 6th offensive lineman who's got some athleticism to him, but not necessarily hasn't really proven himself to be somebody in the receiving game. They've sort of, 2 regimes now have gone out of their way to get tight ends that would play ahead of him in the receiving game. So I think that's not a great sign for his future in the receiving game. He's almost sort of sitting there at tight end 4. But I do expect a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think we can get a lot of jumbo sets, 2 tight ends, fullback, running back. I think we can see a lot of that as well. So let's go to the offensive line, which is improved. We'll start with the 2 new additions to there. And the big one is Ben Powers at left guard. A tremendous season last year, pass blocking. Coming over from Baltimore, that's a run-heavy offense. Though his run blocking grade, and we'll get to that later, is not as good. He's still going to be able to bring a tremendous ability and a good complement to the other guard, Quinn Miners. They sort of are polar. They're sort of the same player, but their strengths are in different aspects of the game, of the offensive execution. Mike McGlinchey comes over from San Francisco, and for him to come in and be the worst pass blocker on the offensive line, the starting 5, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good upgrade on that offensive line. Garrett Bowles, he's solid. You know what you're getting out of him. Just solid in all aspects of the game. Probably top 10 at the position. It's really Lloyd Cushenberry, who I feel like he's the only one that's really in any competition with anybody. And that's with Alex Forsythe, the rookie, who is actually a really good pass blocker. His development in the run game, I think, is going to be the difference between him and Cushenberry. I think Cushenberry will get the start early in the year, but we've seen him not put in really great performances, but they really haven't had the depth behind him to justify getting him off the field. So now with this like roller coaster that Cushenberry takes this team on throughout his career, would Alex Forsythe be a better option for more stability? I think that's a real possibility. Cameron Fleming's really the only other offensive lineman. I think he's sort of like the offensive lineman number 6. If they have a injury at either guard position or at either tackle position, I think Fleming's the guy that steps in to fulfill that. They don't really have any other depth anywhere else. So now we're taking a look at the run blocking, and Ben Powers does take a drastic step down, as does Lloyd Cushenberry. Garrett Bowles kind of is who he is, like I said. Quinn Miners, giant step up. That right side of the offensive line is going to be really great in this run game, especially Mike McGlinchey coming over from San Francisco. Just has I think, coming in with a high level of understanding of how to execute run blocking, which is going to just open up a lot of opportunities for what seems to be, based upon like we've sort of discussed so far, they've sort of been signing players and positioning this team to be that type of a team. They just have no depth. Alex Forsyth, not a great run blocker, but not all that much worse than Lloyd Cushenberry, him being so significantly better, I think, at pass protection. That's really where that competition comes into play. And I think maybe throughout the year, as they start, to work the pass more into the offense, as they sort of figure out the wide receiver depth as we go along, figure out the tight end roles, pass game gets more influential, Forsyth could potentially find his way into the starting lineup because of that. Again, Cameron Fleming, the only real depth out here on this offensive line. It's going to be interesting to see how Wattenberg, Kyle Fuller, Quinn Bailey probably does make the team because he's actually got some pass blocking ability. All these other guys are really just up in the air. I don't know if Isaiah Prince makes the team because of Cameron Fleming. I think Kyle Fuller's also at risk of not making the team either. They could I think they possibly just keep the 9 offensive linemen: Bailey, Forsyth, Wattenberg, and Fleming. But it'll be interesting to see how they navigate keeping offensive linemen. But their starting 5 is as solid as it gets, I would say. So just taking a look at the positional summaries, and there really isn't any position that is top notch. The offensive line is, again, solid, but the position groups in general it's just not great by any means. I think that's going to potentially rear its ugly head for this offense. It's going to be Joe Lombardi and Sean Payton scheming less talented players into a position where they're going to find success more than getting by on just pure talent level like some other teams might. And that's why overall this is my 26th offense. For teams ranked this high, you're not going to see a lot of their overall rankings this low anymore. But this is really the last of that. And that's what I mean when I talk about the importance of the coaching staff. It's the 26th pass offense. They did lose 2 wide receivers, which does bring the grade down a little bit. On the rush offense, they don't really have a true bell cow that I can look at and count on. If this was last year, Javonte Williams obviously gets a higher grade than that, but coming off of that injury, if he's not significantly better than Samaje Perine, then you got a problem, because Perine is good, but he's a good backup. He's a good first and second down relief back more than anything else. So you want there to be a clear separation there, and I'm not so sure that's going to exist, at least early on in this season. So it's going to really be scheme dependent, and the defense playing solid football, leaving this offense with some short fields to be able to really execute and get some wins. Now let's move on to the defense, and we'll start with the pass rush. And you get Randy Gregory and Frank Clark as your edge rushers. It's a good 1-2 punch. Very similar players, which is why I don't necessarily see them being on the field at the same time. I think Frank Clark, more so than Randy Gregory, is going to be a situational third down, pure passing situation edge rusher. Then you got the interior guys, Zach Allen and DJ Jones. Zach Allen got a big contract. I don't know why they didn't give that contract to Draymond Jones, because you're not getting anything different, I don't think, from either one of them. It was a lateral move, so I don't get why they felt they couldn't just give that. I don't know. I don't get it, because they basically did get the exact same contract, if I remember correctly, from Draymond Jones got in Seattle. DJ Jones is a good number 2 guy, sort of an all-purpose interior defensive lineman, much better in the pass rushing situations. And they actually have some pretty good depth off the edge. Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, Nick Benito, I think in passing situations are actually quite good. Baron Browning, he's like I said at the top, sort of like an off-ball linebacker, edge rusher mixed together. redundant with Drew Sanders, so I wonder what Browning's overall future is on this roster. You got Thomas Incoom, who's more of an early down edge guy, and we'll get to that. I don't expect to see him much on third down, or at least early in his career. And then on the interior, they don't have a lot of depth here at all. Uwazurike is suspended. They drafted PJ Mustipher, or they got him as a UDFA, I think. Henningsen is not an interior pass rush guy. Neither is really Jonathan Harris. Mike Purcell, I guess, is a decent backup for an interior. I don't know. The interior depth is just not there as much as the edge depth is. So this is the defensive line against the run, and you got Thomas Incoom, the rookie. This is where he's really going to thrive. I think Jonathan Cooper, the same thing on the opposite side. In terms of being just edge setters in the run game, this is really where they are going to thrive. And this is where they get their roster spot, in my opinion. And then Matt Henningsen and Mike Purcell as interior defensive linemen on early downs. Again, this is where those guys' roster spot sort of gets justified, because you're not going to get a lot from them as interior pass rushers, but as just run stuffers, gap filling, and good vision on locating the ball carrier. I think you got a pretty good group there. As in terms of edge depth, Randy Gregory is okay. I think that he could take some snaps away from Jonathan Cooper. And be more of like an every down outside linebacker. Baron Browning, I think in the run game, is much better suited as an off-ball linebacker. Frank Clark, sort of the same, different from Baron Browning in the sense that he's not an off-ball linebacker, but I don't think you want to see him on early downs. Nick Bonillo, you definitely don't want to see on early downs. Interior defensive line depth, Zach Allen, if they run a base 3-4, I think Zach Allen is on the field. With Purcell and Henningsen. The contract demands it, right? Zach Allen, I think, will be the 3-down interior defensive lineman that sort of moves around between a 1-tech and a 5-tech. When Uwazurike comes back from suspension, I think he can get some play time on early downs as well. And DJ Jones, I think, sort of the same deal as Zach Allen. I think there's going to be a healthy 5-man interior rotation, at least on early downs, with then Zach Allen and DJ Jones sort of having their legs saved for those pass rush situations. Now moving on to the linebackers, and we'll start with the linebackers in the pass game. Singleton and Josie Jewell, average. I would say average in the passing game in terms of being blitzers, zone coverage, man coverage. They're both average in that sense. They're much better suited in the run game as inside linebackers. And I was talking about Drew Sanders earlier, who they drafted, I believe, in the third round with one of the third round picks. Sort of being redundant to Baron Browning. I think that he's going to be used much more as an inside linebacker, blitzing in the A and B gaps. On these passing downs. So I think that we'll see some exotic looks. Vance Joseph is going to have an opportunity to be creative out there and have a guy like Drew Sanders who he can still play some zone coverage as well, even though blitzing is really more his thing. So it'll force some pre and post snap reads from the quarterback, that little extra, trying to figure out when they see a guy like Drew Sanders on the field, figuring out what he's doing. In the run game, though, this is where these two guys really are the 1-2 punch at the linebacker position. I think that they're going to get a lot of playing time because they are really balanced as linebackers. Singleton had, I think, probably his best year last year. Josie Jewell's always kind of been solid ever since he came out, just quietly good. But Drew Sanders isn't going to really give you much in the run game. I think in the run game, he's maybe better suited being an edge guy if you want to really get him on the field in that sense. But again, Stranad and Wilborn, they don't really have a lot of inside linebacker depth outside of them, which is why I see a guy like Baron Browning maybe jumping in here as well, despite his conversion to being a more regular outside linebacker 3-4 outside linebacker. I think he can work his way into being also an inside linebacker in different types of formations and different types of looks, depending on how Vance Joseph wants to run things. Now let's go into the defensive backs with pass coverage, and we'll start with Patrick Surtain, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. A tremendous draft pick by Denver when they made it. Thank you, Carolina, for dropping him right into their laps. He's cornerback 1, locked down that side of the field. Good to go. They got Quan Williams to come in, be that number 2 outside guy. And then Riley Moss. Quan Williams being the nickel. Riley Moss, drafted out of Iowa. I expect him to see the field quite a bit. He's sort of the number 3 corner in terms of pass coverage, but he's also really aggressive in the run game. And we'll get to that. But that's really where I think he's going to earn a lot of his playing time. Justin Simmons really needs to bounce back, sort of entering a downward trend for him. So you want to be able to pull the nose up on that. PJ Locke, I think, is going to be a pure passing situation, defensive back addition out there. You look at some of the depth here. Tremon Smith coming over and Damari Mathis. I think they got some really good corner depth. So they can get a healthy 5-player rotation at the quarterback position. Mix and match guys depending on the situation, depending on the matchups that you get out there. So there's a really good depth there at corner. And even at safety with J.L. Skinner and Caden Stearns, even Kareem Jackson, who is a little bit older, so in the passing game he might get exploited just a little bit. But you have J.L. Skinner and Caden Stearns who can come in there as well. So you got a really healthy pass defense on the back end. You're going to be able to use a lot of fresh legs, which I think is going to be really conducive to high-level play in the passing game. So now taking a look at run support, and I think that the 3 starting corners in the pass game, this is really the first time that I'm looking at them and being like, these are also probably your 3 best options in run support as well. Patrick Surtain is a pretty damn good tackler, really aggressive. Quan Williams, same thing out of the nickel. Riley Moss showed some really good attributes in the run game as well. Justin Simmons needs to improve on that. I think he'll be a deep middle safety anyway. PJ Locke, you see he sort of sticks out like a sore thumb there. I expect him to come off the field on early downs. He sort of will be that pass situation defensive back. And that's when Kareem Jackson will step in and be the early down safety. Bassie really is a special teams guy. That's where he gets a lot of his attributes from. Damari Mathis also has a really good special teams ability. So in the run game, just naturally, just more aggressive guys. J.L. Skinner really needs to work on his ability in the run game. He's a bigger safety, so he needs to play up to his size, I think, a little bit more. So Caden Stearns, I think there's going to be some interesting competition going on there. Tremon Smith, in the run game, I think he needs to step up as well. I think he's going to get most of his work on later downs, maybe in like dime packages. I think Fabian Moreau is really the only one I can look at right now on the roster that I go, this is the one that's probably not going to make it. And then it'll be interesting to see how many defensive backs they decide to hold in comparison to other positions, because there is some guys the rest of the guys are really have specific skill sets that could be good complements throughout a game, like Kareem Jackson playing him on early downs and then putting in PJ Locke on passing downs. That's a good compliment to have. And then you got a guy like J.L. Skinner, who, if he can play up to his size, might be able to execute in both aspects. And then, Damari Mathis, Tremon Smith, guys like that. So how they decide to keep these guys, of course, injuries always happen. I think that's something to watch out for Denver fans. Just taking a look at the positional summary again, and they got really good balance at the cornerback position in both aspects, pass coverage and run support. I think the linebackers are also a really good asset for this defense. I think where they're really going to be lacking is in run support depth, particularly at the edge and the interior. I think at the linebacker position, you can work Baron Browning in there, and it sort of does raise the depth grade a bit there. But I wouldn't be too concerned either, because when you're in a 3-4 defense, your base really only has 2 true off-ball linebackers, so you can mix and match in guys, unless you just have a complete emergency room of a of a positional group, you'll be okay there. I think the safeties, you can get a good rotation as well and develop certain guys in the run support aspect. The interior in general is going to be where this team probably is at its weakest. Certainly by grades it is. There's no pass rushing depth whatsoever. Not much interior depth either. And I think the top end talent outside of Zach Allen being the 3-down interior guy, I think they need to have guys step up. I think a lot of the younger guys are going to need to step up. Wuzuriki. I think PJ Mustafa could potentially be that guy to eventually grow into that. But that's really the part of the defense where I'm concerned. So just take a look at the overall defense. They are my 12th defense in the league. The 10th rush defense. If they get good interior defensive line play, then it could be, top 7 rush defense probably. The linebackers are so solid. They get great run support from the defensive backs. So that rush defense is going to be, I think, really good and really raise this defense up. It's the pass defense, the front four, they don't really have an alpha edge rusher. Randy Gregory, is he that guy? Is he not? Frank Clark, is he on the wrong side age-wise? How they use that edge rotation, I think will be really telling to this overall pass defense. I think in terms of cornerback play, that's really the strength of it. So I think that their ability to play, to man up at the cornerback position this year is going to be a real asset overall for the front four in general. And maybe Zach Allen takes an extra step forward that they weren't expecting Draymond Jones to take. I think that's a possibility, and we'll see how that sort of works out. But the overall record prediction I have for them is a 10-win team. They start off the season with a pretty good start. Vegas and Washington, I think you get 2 wins right out the gate, and that's really good for the confidence. I think when they play against a team like Miami might be just that extra level above them, but then they get to go and play Chicago, and playing at Chicago really complements what they're going to do well on defense, which is have these like athletic players, especially when you get great run support from the defensive backs. That's really going to help contain Justin Fields between the tackles. They do play the Jets in Kansas City. I think they can steal a win against Kansas City just based upon how they match up against them. Granted, they could get swept by them and then just split with the Chargers. I think that's a possibility as well. So they'll have them splitting with the Raiders. At the end of the year, the Raiders play spoiler at home. But they also got Minnesota, Cleveland. They play Houston. And I think that in terms of, there's a lot of coaching matchups, I think, here that could also work out well for them, particularly Minnesota, Cleveland. Houston against a rookie coach, even though I think highly of DeMeco Ryans. I think that Sean Payton picking on a rookie head coach is going to be fun for him, and I think it's going to work out really well. And then in Green Bay, I think it's sort of the same idea. Is Vance Joseph maybe getting exotic and confusing Jordan Love. So just a quick summary: 10-7, second in the division, 8th in the conference, 12th in the league, 6th best coaching staff, and that coaching staff in particular, with how strong they're going to be, I think offensively, are going to raise up this 26th ranked offense. That's ranked that way because of the overall talent level. I think they're going to be able to raise them up and get more out of less than what we saw last year with Nathaniel Hackett. And I think the defense is in a position to really set them up to be really good and to make them this fringe playoff team. And I think, again, like I said, it's really Russell Wilson who's going to be the one that swings it. Which way is it going to go? No playoffs, playoffs. No playoffs, playoffs. That's up to Russell Wilson. Of course, I think if they pick up some key injuries, that'll play a role as well. But assuming that they don't pick up monster injuries any more than any other team, that's where this team really is going to live or die, Russell Wilson. And there you have it, my number 12 team in my 2022-2023 NFL Deep Dive Series. Holy crap, where does time go? Make sure to hit the like and subscribe if you've made it this far. And I really appreciate you guys being here. We're almost there at the top 10. I want to know what you guys think of the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson, Sean Payton in the comment section below. And the other videos of this series are on either side of my head. And I look forward to making the next video. We are so close to the top 10. So close to the top 10. There's a couple teams I know you guys are like, holy crap, where are these teams that we're so used to being bad that are now apparently top 10 teams? Yes, they are. And I'll see you guys next time.